Welcome aboard.
Axios executive editor Kate Marino.
I'm Kate Marino, Axios executive editor, and I'm very excited to be here tonight with all of you on this very special day, Giving Tuesday, for our annual Giving Tuesday event in partnership with Bank of America. Over the years, we've covered many of the ways in which leaders in business and philanthropy are choosing to give back. And tonight, we are very lucky to be joined by two leaders who are doing just that. Our first guest is the CEO of GoFundMe, Tim Cadogan. Tim.
Comfy chair.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's Giving Tuesday, and it's a day that has become more and more important for a lot of organizations in terms of their fundraising. How do you see that playing out at GoFundMe? Is it a huge day for you?
Well, I just want to give credit. I just found out just now that Jean Case helped create Giving Tuesday. So she's coming up next.
She'll be up next.
Yeah. So it's a very important day. It kind of kicks off giving season, which rolls all the way through the end of December. It's one of the three biggest days of the year for many nonprofits. And it is a moment to sort of build on the back of Thanksgiving, which is really about thanks and reflection, and take stock of what you care about and give. And often that is money, but it doesn't have to be money. It can be time as well. So it's a very important mobilization moment for many of the nonprofits that we work with.
And do you think that Giving Tuesday spurs more giving, a net increase in giving, or does it just kind of move around the days on which people are giving?
No, I think it spurs more, and
Yeah.
it creates that moment where people think, can I do a little extra? So, for example, if you're giving to an organization, you may decide, hey, maybe it's time to become a recurring donor, right? Which makes a big difference to an organization because it creates that predictability. So it's that moment in time that creates that extra thought that leads to more giving.
Yeah. And tonight's theme is, of course, the future of philanthropy. How are you seeing the world of giving changing from your unique vantage point? You see a lot of stuff that the rest of us don't see. So
Yeah,
share some of
sure.
those unique insights.
And just to give you a sec, we run a business that's consumer personal fundraising, which is GoFundMe. We also run a business called Classy by GoFundMe, which is fundraising software for large nonprofits, World Central Kitchen, Salvation Army, and so on. So we see both sides of that. So what's changing? One, personal fundraising is definitely changing. So the fact that an individual can set up a fundraiser for themselves, for a friend, or for a charity that they care about and raise money is different over the last sort of 5 to 10 years and is accelerating. That's really significant. Second thing is Gen Z, which are folks aged 12 to 27. And of course, with each year that passes, another cohort, another year enters the workforce and becomes adults. And they're very influential and they're digital natives. So they're influential through their money, but even more through their sharing, through their use of social media and building community. So let me give you one example. We had a user recently who gave $5, but she shared that fundraiser with her extensive community, and $100,000 of donations came from that share, 4,000 donations. So that's the kind of impact someone from that generation can have.
Yeah, and that sort of leads into my next question, which is, we in the news business are trying to figure out how to reach our readers. And that's changing. It's changed very fast over the last 5 and 10 years. And I'm sure you're experiencing some version of that
Yes.
in your business.
Yes.
How do your users reach their eventual donors? How do they find them? How do they get them activated? Is
Well,
that changing?
yes, the pattern is the same, which is things are becoming more atomized, more personalized, and people's trust is developed at a more of a personal level. So it's really important for an organization, if you're fundraising, to embrace your community and have them become evangelists on your behalf. So the idea of P2C, person to charity fundraising, is super powerful. And that's something that a lot of our bigger clients are embracing, but it's also important for smaller folk. I'll give you a personal example. Over Thanksgiving, I've been running a fundraiser for my search and rescue team that I volunteer for. That's a great example, and we see thousands of people doing that, saying, hey, I'm a part of this. It may be a church group, doesn't have to be a search and rescue team. I want to get out there, I want to reach to people, and you bring in that community, and you create this kind of multiplier effect.
How much of an influencer are you?
I'm not an influencer.
Get everyone on board?
I'm a text and WhatsApper, so I'm not a real social, but that is actually really effective. So whatever works for you to communicate what you care about and then bring people in to support the organization, that works for small orgs, medium orgs, and big ones.
Mm-hmm. So can you just say a little bit more about the role of influencers? Because that just seems to be kind of like the nut that everyone's trying to crack in terms of who are they? How do we use them? How do we get them involved?
Well, I would say that everybody is an influencer, actually. So it just depends on how broad is your influence. So again, if you talk about Gen Z is 10 times more willing to share a fundraiser than a baby boomer. It may not be a total surprise, but the degree is big. So that willingness to get out there and say, hey, I know 10 people, I'm going to influence them. I know 100 people, I know 1 million people. Now, I know we tend to think of an influencer as like 1 million plus, but actually just influencing 10 people, that's a 10x multiplier.
And what platforms do you think? It's not Facebook anymore, right?
Or not really. No.
Where are they sharing it that are most effective?
It's TikTok, it's Reddit, it's Insta Live, it's also WhatsApp and WhatsApp groups. If you go into, say, diaspora communities in a lot of countries use WhatsApp groups very heavily because it's free in a lot of countries, and that's important. Those are really important, can have a lot of influence. So it is all of those. And just give you an example, a lot of the streaming technology is really powerful. So the ability for an influencer to use streaming, we introduced a streaming widget early in the fall that we saw a community of Swifties raise a lot of money for a domestic abuse charity during one of Taylor Swift's era concerts, right? So the Swiftie is streaming and talking and raising money while this is going on, raises $35,000 during a concert.
Okay,
That's what's happening.
Yeah, so speaking of technology then and the technological innovations that you guys are looking at, you've recently introduced some AI tools.
We did.
Tell us about those and how they work and whether people are getting value from them.
Yeah, well, here's the interesting thing. So what we do is all about emotion, right? No one's making any money out of giving or receiving. It's about asking for help for yourself or for an organization and giving help. That's human. The AI is there to help that human connection. So it's things like helping you make your story better. It's things like offering you a better title, because picking a title is a hard thing to do even when you're not stressed, and often when you're creating a personal fundraiser, you are stressed. It's helping you with your sharing. It's helping you think about what do you donate. So I'll give you a data point that we haven't shared yet. We've had, since we've introduced this sort of suite of tools in the last 6 months, we had users use those tools 9 million times in the last 6 months, which is significant.
9 million uses of the AI tools.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And so that has helped people connect more effectively, and we're leaning into that a lot.
So do you still think of GoFundMe as a disruptor? Because I feel like when the company first started, it was a total disruptor. Now it's been around for a while. It's legacy. It's sort of entrenched.
No, definitely not legacy. Definitely not. We're way too young for that. So no, I think of us as an innovator. Like I don't love the disruption world because I don't think we're blowing up what exists. We're layering on top of it. We're adding. So there's a lot of tremendous traditional ways of raising money and giving, and those are extremely valuable and deserve to stay. What we're doing is we're creating a way for anyone to ask for help and get help. That's super powerful and is additive. The other thing we're doing is we're connecting the world of an organization asking for help and an individual asking for help for that organization, which is a multiplier. So it is it's positive sum. I think of disruption as a little bit like blowing up something that existed and replacing it. I think we're adding and layering and innovating on top.
Tell me something surprising about GoFundMe or something that you think a lot of people probably don't know.
Okay, two things. One, I think you may be surprised how big the company is. So we've had $30 billion raised. We have 90+% aided awareness in the US. We operate in 20 countries. We're just 800 people, right? It's a lot smaller than you might think. So when you hit us for customer service, just give us some grace. Second thing is I've touched on it here, but most people think GoFundMe is just the personal fundraising side of our business. Back in 2022, we bought a company called Classy, now known as Classy by GoFundMe, and that provides software to medium and large nonprofits, some of whom I mentioned, to help them be successful in fundraising. And over time, we're sort of connecting those in some of the ways that we've talked about. But that second piece of the business is less well known.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I typically think of it as, the individual that does the medical or, my house burned down or something like that. But did you say how many organizations use GoFundMe for their fundraising? And you mean
about
like nonprofits?
4,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that is a pretty big
Yeah,
part of
it's
the
pretty
business
big.
as well.
It's pretty
Who
big.
would you consider the competitors in that space? Is that like Global Giving?
Blackboard is probably the biggest. They offer
Okay.
a suite of products. So they're probably the biggest kind of player in the space. Yep.
And I feel like people, the legacy thought on philanthropy is, wealthy donors get to control, who gets funded and who gets attention and who gets money. Talk a little bit about just kind of the collective power of grassroots and how much grassroots funding has really become a bigger part of the philanthropy world over the last decade plus.
Well, I'll use a more common word, which is help. So every human needs help. Every single one of us needs help through our lives. I'll give you a stupid example. When you were a baby, did you get through it without any help? No, right? So all the way through our cycle of life, there's times where we need a lot of help, much less help, much more help, usually towards the end of our lives. So, and help is inherent to being human, right? It is the way that we connect. It's the way that we get ourselves through our lives. And so in a way, what we have done is create a digital way of expressing that. We've enabled people to do this very inherent, ancient thing, which is help one another, because we are social species. And we have updated that for the digital age. And therefore, we've made it more scalable, because that's inherent to digital. And we made it global. We made it quicker. But we still hang on to that inherent humanness. Now, the tricky part of that is asking for help is also hard. How many people here like asking for help? Okay, how many people here like asking for help in public?
I do
right.
not
Even
see
your
any
hand
hands.
went down.
For the
right?
record, no hands.
So it is really difficult. And one of our biggest quests is how do we make it easier and frankly more acceptable to ask for help? And that, I think we've made progress, but we need to make a lot more progress. And I'll give you a couple of parallels. Like in 2002, would you have got into a stranger's car based on what an app told you?
Ooh,
no, we spent our whole
probably
life,
not.
right? No, never get in a stranger's car.
I think
right?
my parents told me not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's parents told you not to do that, and yet Uber, through a lot of work, has built trust that it's perfectly okay to get in the back of a stranger's car, right? Same with Airbnb. So we're trying to do something similar, but with help, right? We're asking for help, because once you ask for help, then you can give it. And so, we've all been in a situation where a friend of ours is going through a difficult time, and almost all of us say is, I wish there was something I could do to help. And if that person asks for help, you can then do something. Or if that person's friend creates a GoFundMe, suddenly all of their friends and family and their neighbors and their community have something that they can do. And yes, it involves giving money, but when they give money, they show that they care. And so every single customer I've talked to who's been the recipient of a GoFundMe has told me, two things. One, this was really hard to do, but once I did it, it unlocked so much love and care. And it's the fact that those people helped me that got me through the situation, as well as the financial support. And so that's kind of the heart of what we're doing, and making that open, democratic, and open to everybody is the center of what we're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I think when we, have friends who lose a loved one or something like that, it's always, what can I do? What can I do? And usually it's nothing. But
Right.
if there's something like
there is
this that
something
gives
you can
you
do.
an opportunity to be able to do something, I think
Right.
that really resonates.
And even if you're in a situation where you see that, and maybe some people don't even have $10, but they could share that fundraiser. And it doesn't have to even be on social media, right? You can pull out a QR code. You can just tell someone about it. So there's a way for everybody to help that's very simple and very powerful.
Okay, so one fun thing to end on. What is the best book that you've read lately?
So I don't know if it's fun, but I just finished, this is my Thanksgiving. Over Thanksgiving, I finished Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Sapiens. He's an amazing author and I think an amazing thinker. And it's a hell of a book. It's about information networks, AI. And it is very thought-provoking. It's very exciting. It's also a bit disturbing. And it's a book I highly recommend. It wasn't the lightest Thanksgiving read, but it captured my attention. So it was a very powerful read. I'd recommend it.
Great. And second fun thing, you just told me before we came on stage. What are you doing tomorrow morning? Tell the group.
Oh,
it's fun.
I'm very fortunate to represent what we're doing and to ring the opening bell at the NASDAQ with a bunch of, and to recognize Giving Tuesday with a lot of great nonprofits and community leaders. So
Very cool. Congrats.
thank you.
All right. Well, I wish we had more time, but that's it for us.
Thank
so
you.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Reflecting on the impact Bank of America has been able to make over the past 20 years with the neighborhood builders is humbling. The fact that we've been able to help more than 3,500 nonprofit leaders strengthen their leadership skills across nearly 1,800 organizations is truly remarkable.
I've never seen anything like Neighborhood Builders. Between the unrestricted grants and all the professional development for the executive directors and the emerging leaders, I think it is one of the finest, if not finest, professional development programs and community support programs.
And I love the concept of investing in an emerging leader. I mean, who else does that? That sets the Bank of America Neighborhood Builders program aside from others.
So the Neighborhood Builders program has been instrumental for us, having that social capital, that sense of community and camaraderie to see other people that are going through similar challenges than you, allows you to tap into the wisdom of our community and the people alongside of us.
It's Giving Leadership. It's Giving Tuesday, people, and we have one of the most interesting thinkers about philanthropy on the stage today. She is a philanthropist. She has been instrumental in forming some of the most profound changes in philanthropy over the past couple of decades, which we will try and get to. She's also the chairman of the National Geographic Society, so please welcome Jean Case.
Thank you. Been very excited about tonight. Thanks for coming out.
And you are one of the co-founders of the Case Foundation, which is a large, many-tentacled organization. And one of the things that the Case Foundation does is, according to its mission statement and its website, is movement building. And I was trying to work out what movement building was. And it turns out that one of the movements that you have built, or helped to build, is Giving Tuesday itself. Tell me a little bit about what is movement building and what did you do when you helped to build Giving Tuesday? What's involved in that?
Sure. Well, the emphasis there has to be on helping because it was a team sport when it came together. It was the 92nd Street Y here in the UN Foundation that had the original idea and then asked a bunch of fellows to come along, including the Case Foundation. So, but can I just say before we even get started, up here behind me it says the future of philanthropy. And one of the things I think is really important is to remember that philanthropy is defined as the love of humanity. And as I was coming over tonight, I was thinking, you know, when we had Giving Tuesday in mind, we did not have just check writing to nonprofits in mind. We truly had the love of humanity, and I thought what Tim talked about is such a great example of that. But I think we could agree as we sit here today, we might not have predicted in 2012 when we got this started that in 2024 we'd be in a world of hurt and we could use a lot more love of humanity. So thank you, thank you.
Is this a dig at the effective altruists who care more about chickens than they do about humans?
Not at all. It's really to say that we all have different ways that we love humanity and love one another. And the whole idea of Giving Tuesday was, you know, we had looked around and we saw that, you know, Thanksgiving was always kind of a sacred American tradition where you do stop and, you know, hopefully you take stock, right? And there's gratitude. But then what happens? Whammo, Black Friday. Whammo, Small Business Saturday. Then Cyber Monday was added. And it's like, that's a whole lot of consumption 5 minutes after you've just tried to stop and say, thanks for all I have. And we were just hoping that maybe it could lead to a whole lot of giving, to be honest with you. That really, and you know, the question came out earlier, you know, is it new giving? Is it incremental giving? Or would it have been there anyway? You know, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. But it's kind of like if we take a moment after we've, you know, fought people in line or whatever we've done to go consume, and just take a moment and say, well, what might we give to? And sometimes those can even be words, right? But the things I'm seeing around me this year are not necessarily writing a check to a nonprofit. They're true expressions of what I said is, you know, the love of humanity.
And that's actually a kind of a theme of the Case Foundation. You seem like in terms of writing checks to nonprofits over the past few years, you're not doing that so much. It doesn't have a big endowment. It doesn't like write checks to nonprofits anymore. I guess you're moving more into impact investing?
Well, that's not entirely true that we're not. When we got started 26 years ago, we both, my husband and I, had both come out of technology. And, you know, I felt, as CEO of the Case Foundation, I felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes. I didn't know the language of philanthropy. I didn't know the rules and how you're supposed to talk and act and everything else. And so, you know, what we said was we're going to do what worked well for us in business, and we're going to try to bring that to philanthropy. And I'm not talking about venture philanthropy here. I'm just saying, you know, the success we had in building a great company was using all the arrows in our quiver. And what I mean by that was, what are you bringing to push this forward? And we've always tried to do that with philanthropy. So we don't just bring our own resources, we open our network and our resources. We work with governments. We're very cross-sector focused. There was a rule for a long time at the Case Foundation, still somewhat true, that in order to take forward an initiative, we must have a cross-sector partnership doing it. So a nonprofit, hopefully some other foundations at the table, a business and government. And it's through those kind of all the arrows in the quiver, really using everything you have to have impact, that you see movement building take place.
One of the stated aims of the Case Foundation is to revolutionize philanthropy. So I guess the implicit idea there is that there's something that needs to be revolutionized. There's something a little bit sort of old-fashioned and fusty about it.
No question. When we got started anyway, and I have to give the philanthropy sector great credit. I think they've come really far in the last decade or two. But when we got started, I had come out of marketing, consumer marketing, right? And if you're going to take a product forward, or if you want to bring a service or a benefit to someone, you dang well better know what they need. You better be talking to them. You better be asking them, what do you like? What don't you like? You know, is this doing the job? But what I saw was a lot of really well-intended people sitting around tables who were thinking about solutions for people without engaging them. And that was really a surprise to me. But as I look around today, I think it's a much better practice in philanthropy of really understanding those you're trying to serve, make sure their voice. We did a white paper many years ago called Citizens at the Center. And I guarantee you it had one point. Ask people you're trying to serve what they need and what they want. And yet it was kind of hailed as like a really important document. But today, I do feel that the sector more broadly is doing that, and it's not, there was a period of time, I think, as foundations got started where they were a little bit ivory tower, and it's wonderful to see a new generation of leaders that have come in right here in New York, Rockefeller Foundation and Ford Foundation, next generation leaders who are very, very people-minded in terms of who they're trying to serve.
What's the slogan? Nothing about us without us, something like that. But you have, one of the ways in which you have created this change in the way that people think about giving and that people involve the recipients much more than they used to, is through these convenings of the signatories to the Giving Pledge, which is another one of those movements that you were involved very early on in. That's, obviously you need to be a billionaire to be one of those members to be in that room, and you're talking to each other and you're like sharing best practices and that kind of thing. How profound has that been, do you think, in terms of the practice of philanthropy?
Yeah, well, I really want to make it very clear. All of the credit for the creation of the Giving Pledge goes to Melinda and Bill and Warren. We were not part of creating that. We just came in early. And I shared with you earlier, Felix, it was a hard decision for us in the sense that we had made the decision long before that time that we would give away the majority of our wealth in our lifetime. We just felt, that there were good things that could happen because of it rather than just giving it on to our next generation. But the Giving Pledge had a requirement that if you were going to join, it would be public, and you'd write this letter about why you're pledging. For us, the attraction was, and it's turned out what we've loved the most, is learning with others and being able to take advantage of sort of what other people have done and learn both from what's worked, but probably more importantly, what hasn't. And one of the great gatherings we've done for quite some time are these things we call fail fests. And it was another thing that really concerned me, and it still concerns me somewhat for those of you in nonprofits. It still concerns me a little bit on the nonprofit sector front, which is that if you're a nonprofit and you're out there, trying to get grants, you're doing the good work, you really care about the issue that you're taking forward, sometimes it's not so comfortable to say, whoops, we screwed up, or that didn't work so well the way we planned it. But the fact of the matter is, and I think philanthropy is definitely on board with this, if you're going to really change the world and you're going to, do extraordinary things, chances are you're taking a risk and therefore you're going to fail along the way. And I just think one of the things we have to be realistic about is how we grow is through failure. And of course, I'm not saying, oh, no big deal, you totally bombed what you said you were going to do. But there has to be a little bit of a spirit amongst all of us that says, we're going to try some stuff. In this realm, we're not sure what the outcome could be. And we've really tried to encourage both the donor and the recipient side to have that conversation.
So we're among friends here. Mm-hmm. What's your biggest failure at the Case Foundation?
Oh, I've written about it. I wrote a book about my failures called Be Fearless. And really making the case that failure is actually the answer to innovation and moving forward. Ours was a clean water initiative that we undertook in Africa, putting 1,000 clean water interventions in villages across Africa, and it failed. And it was horrifying. And I remember when we were sitting around as a board of the organization, we have glass walls at the Case Foundation. And, I was chairman of it, and I said, okay, here's where we are, and I think at this point we have to make a decision of go or no go, and this is where it's failed. And I remember everybody out there, we're trying to have this conversation without it showing on our faces. Something really horrible was being discussed. But look, we decided we had to just come clean, and I remember the blog I wrote that day, and you know, my hands were shaking as I pressed the send button, but I felt like we had made mistakes, and maybe, just maybe, people who would come along with us later could learn from those mistakes. And instead of the people who had worked with us on that, you know, saying, how could that happen, they actually thanked me, and they thanked me for the fact that I was honest and transparent about it, because at least at the time we were kind of talking about those things, there wasn't a lot of acknowledgement of failure in philanthropy or in nonprofits.
In your Giving Pledge letter, which is, what, 15 years old now, something like that? You said you were going to give away the majority of your wealth to, quote, worthy charitable causes. You've now been involved in revolutionizing philanthropy for the past 15 years. Is that still the way you think about it, that there's like this sum of wealth and then out there are these charitable causes and then there's just going to be a transfer at some point from you to them?
No, not at all. I don't see it that way. It's very surprising that you say those were our words. I guess they were. No, I think we continue to try to work in collaboration with others to move the needle in meaningful ways, and not just to give to worthy causes. I mean, we fund a lot of, we fund a lot of papers and research to try to put issues on the table. We have done enormous training and publishing around what impact investing is, because it never made sense to us that over here, we're trying to write charitable checks to make a difference. But over here, there's this amazing group of entrepreneurs who are bringing new companies forward to address the same issues. And how could you just say, well, that doesn't matter over there? And it goes back to that, all the arrows in our quiver. The things we care about, we're not just giving to, we're investing in new companies that are emerging. We've invested in numerous giving platforms. You were talking about this earlier, Tim. Some of the earliest ones that today have received nearly $20 billion of giving through them over time. So it isn't worthy causes in the sense of nonprofits, and it's never really been. It's been about trying to move the needle, kind of pushing the whole thing forward a little.
And what happens to all of these impact investments when you die?
When I die?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they're going to exit before I die, and we'll
Okay,
get our money.
and then they exit,
I mean, that's sort of the idea.
And then they exit and they become money, and then they become
and
more impact
and then we
investments.
replenish it, absolutely. Or we use that,
But there's a
money
portfolio.
to then
There's a portfolio of worth a large amount of money at some point.
That's
and I just want to know
correct.
what happens to that wealth.
That wealth, as the money comes back into it, then gets recycled either into other causes we care about, into paying for our teams that help us do all this great stuff, or into more impact investments.
And that you think is a permanent thing that will outlive you?
I do, yeah.
So in this project of like improving the world, moving the needle.
I think it's a little more than a project, but yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean that in a pejorative way at all. I mean, it's a grand project. It's a noble project. Do you consider yourself to be accountable to anyone?
Oh, most definitely. I think we should be accountable. I think if we're going to operate in this space where we're trying to move the needle and major challenges, I think absolutely it's part of the reason. It is that belief in accountability that lets us talk about what doesn't work and literally publish it. We've published the things that haven't worked because we want to hold ourselves accountable, and more importantly, hope that the next person that comes along won't make the same mistakes we made. But yes, I do believe it. And I also, one of our strongly held beliefs is that it shouldn't just be about what we wanted. Time and time again, we've put decision-making into the hands of people out there to tell us what they think we should do in terms of where we're spending our money.
We have run out of time, but I do want to finish with one very quick, fun thing. When you are not moving the needle and changing the planet, what is your number one splurge that you just spend your own money on?
Oh, wow. Well, I bought a new car last year, and my last car was 20 years old. But I bought a new EV, the Rivian truck, and I think it's the best vehicle on the planet. So that was a definite splurge.
Rivian trucks. Well, Jean Case, thank you very much for being on stage. This was fantastic. Thanks to Bank of America for making this all possible. Subscribe to Axios Markets, all of the other Axios newsletters.